Hey everybody and welcome back. So Pierre Polyev asked Mark Carney, why doesn't Canada have a oil strategic reserve? And Mark Carney answered back, we do. They're both right in terms of their their answers and their questions. So Mark Carney is correct that we do have reserves. The reserves are where we know the oil is and where it's in the ground and it's still there. And those are technically reserves, okay? Because even in the US, they count that as a reserve, as their strategic reserve. Now, Pierre Polyev is not incorrect on why we don't have a strategic reserve. And the reserve he's talking about is also what the US has, is oil that's easily accessible, meaning it's already been drilled, it's been brought up to the surface, and it's put into a holding facility. As you know, in the States, those locations are actually underground. So they, it's kind of funny. They pump it out of the ground and then put it back into the ground in four locations that are salt mines. So they're both right in terms of their concerns and their responses. Now, let's talk about why Pierre Polyev is asking why we don't have a reserve, a strategic reserve like the U.S. does. So, back in the 70s, OPEC, the Middle East, basically told the U.S. to kick rocks, and they stopped shipping fuel to them and oil, and fuel costs went through the roof. Long lineups at gas stations running out, and so on and so forth. So they created a strategic um, oil reserve, and they have it in four locations: Bryan Mound, Texas, with 254 million barrels; Big Hill, Texas, with 170 million barrels; West Huckleberry, Louisiana, 227 million barrels; and Bayou Chicote, Louisiana, with 76 million barrels. Now, that is equal to 125 days of U.S. crude oil net imports. Basically, if they had to bring in imports, that equals 125 days that they can last if they were totally cut off. That made sense back then because they were not a net exporter of oil up until recently. They required imports from around the world. So, in terms of a national security, it made sense for them to have a reserve that they can tap into through natural disasters, war, volatility in the market, like for example, what's going on with here in Iran, that they wouldn't be cut off and their security wouldn't be at risk. That uh, their industries can keep rolling. They've got fuel for their war machine and farms and everything else, and so on and so forth, until they could um, find a solution. Canada doesn't need that. Okay. We are a net exporter. We produce just under 6 million barrels a day in terms of oil. And we use just over 2 million, 2.3 million barrels a day. So, in terms of security, we're okay. We're not even half of what we are able to produce. Now, there's another reason why Pierre is asking for a strategic stockpile is to help out in crises like what's going on with Iran. They've cut off the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the oil production has been isolated. That's a fifth of the oil being shipped around the world is not getting to its destination. So the cost of oil went through the roof. Well, is going through the roof. I think we're just at about $100 a barrel today. So it doesn't benefit us Canadians. It's more of helping out our allies and our neighbors. I don't know how much we want to help out the US right now because they're the ones who started this. But if any other situation, it would be ideal to help out our allies. But why, as Canadians, do we have to cover that cost of that burden? Again, we produce more than what we need, so we're okay. It's to help everybody else. The idea of the stockpile is for people who import more oil than they do export, or require more than what they use. So why aren't they having their own stockpile? We'll be happy to ship them as much as they can, as much as they want, stockpile it into, above ground, below ground, like what they do in the U.S. And then if there's situation with war, natural disasters, and things like that, they'll be fine, and we'll continue to supply them. Because first of all, we'd have to find a location to store all this excess oil. Okay, either put above ground tanks, which require a lot of maintenance, infrastructure, or we would have to find mines or underground caverns like they did the natural salt mines in the US and pour the oil down there and fill them up. But that still requires infrastructure that we would have to pay for. Not only that, who's going to refine that oil? Who's going to dig it up? Who's going to drill and everything else? The private companies aren't going to do it just to put it back in the ground and wait for a rainy day. The government's going to have to pay for it. Now, in the US, what they do is the royalties, the money that they make on the royalties for the leases and everything else pays for that oil that they put into the reserves. They're not taking it out of their budgets. But that means less money in their budget that they could spend on their citizens. That would be the same thing with us. We would use the royalties we would make with those private corporations to fund buying it from those corporations to get the oil and then pump it back in the ground. But as any business owner would understand, that's inventory that's just sitting for a rainy day. That doesn't really hurt us if there's a rainy day. Again, because we produce the more what we use. So why is Pierre Poilievre pushing for something like that we don't require? Again, agreed, we should help our allies, but they should burden that cost of reserves. Let them build the infrastructure in their country and everything else. So he's trying to make it look like that we could make money on it, which we would, 100%, because, when we bought it at a price, say at $50 a barrel when it's low, hold on to it. And at times like this, we would be able to flood the markets and, bring down the price, which I want to get to another point, but we would be able to sell it, say $90 a barrel. So we made $40 a barrel, but we've had to hold on to that oil for who knows how long, years, decades, whatever, at the cost of the taxpayers for something that's not our problem. Now, when it's released, the theory is that we've released more oil into the market, that will bring the price down. Let me show you an article. Dozens of countries agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil, but it didn't bring down prices. The International Energy Agency said Wednesday the member countries had unanimously agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil from their reserves in a bid to ease price that are soaring due to Iran war. Because again, we don't want the cost of oil to go too high. It slows down economy, growth, and everything else. The United States will contribute 172 million barrels of oil from the Department of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve starting next week. It will take approximately 120 days to deliver based on planned discharge rates, the department said in a statement on the release. Following the initial IEA announcement, U.S. crude oil prices briefly fell to lows of the day on news of the potential for fresh supply. But they quickly climbed higher and once again had surpassed $90 per barrel by late Wednesday. So, as you can see from the article, there's no guarantee that even if we had a reserve and we would do the same thing as all these other countries, that the cost of oil would come down. That would help Canadians and the rest of the world. The best way to do it, okay, would be to tell those oil companies here in Canada that our production rate that we need, you sell it at a specific price. And any access you have, ship it around the world at whatever price the world market is. Don't need infrastructure, don't need capacity to hold all that oil. Taxpayers don't have to pay for it. Taxpayers don't have to pay to pump that oil out, put it back into the ground or tankers. to sit on it for years on end and then potentially maybe have a return. I know the liberals won't say it, but even the conservatives won't say it. So, this idea that we need to have our own reserve stockpile, we have one. It's in the ground. The best reserve you have is to know where the oil is, have the capacity to pull out for what we need and the rest of the world. Again, we barely use half of what we produce. And then when it's required, we pull it out and ship it everywhere else. Exactly what we're doing now. So this idea that we need a national strategic reserve is all nothing but noise. We don't. And it would be a waste of taxpayer money if we went down that road. And these are the ideas that Pierre Poilievre has, nothing original, but that doesn't actually, look into the nuance if we actually need it. Now, if we were a net importer of oil, agreed 100%. But that's not the case for Canada. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you think. If maybe I missed something on why it would be strategically beneficial for Canada. Again, the potential to make money, even in a business case, you have to sit on that inventory for years. And the cost to maintain that infrastructure, I don't know if it would make sense. Strategically, national security, yes, you can't put a price on that. But in terms of a business case, because the private companies would have done the same thing, and they're not doing that. So let me know in the comments what you think. Anyways, guys, take care. We'll talk later.